Guys, don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends and family. Also, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. There's a particular kind of fear that grips you when you realize your child is in danger. It's not like normal fear. It's deeper, more primal. It doesn't creep up on you. It grabs you by the throat, digs in its claws, and refuses to let go. That's the fear I felt that day in the park, and sometimes I still feel it when I think about what could have happened. It was a classic Dallas September afternoon. Warm air, the smell of cut grass, and golden leaves scattered across the ground. My 6-year-old son, Ryan, had been looking forward to the park all day. So after school, we stopped by for an hour before heading home. I remember watching him run toward the playground, his little sneakers kicking up dust as he joined the other kids. He was always so full of energy, fearless in that way only children could be. I sat on a bench nearby, keeping an eye on him while scrolling through my phone. That's when I heard it, someone calling Ryan's name. At first, I barely registered it. Kids call each other's names all the time. But then I heard it again, closer this time. A deep, unfamiliar voice. "Ryan, buddy, come here." I looked up. A man was crouched near the edge of the playground, using the slide for cover. He was smiling, too wide, too eager. His arms outstretched like he was expecting my son to run straight into them. My stomach twisted. I stood up so fast the bench scraped against the pavement. Ryan had stopped running. He was staring at the man, one foot slightly raised, like he was deciding whether to go to him. "Ryan!" My voice came out sharper than I intended. My son turned, startled, and I gestured for him to come back to me. He jogged over. The man straightened up, hands slipping into the pockets of his jeans. His smile faded slightly, like he hadn't expected to be interrupted. I put a hand on Ryan's shoulder, my pulse hammering. "Do you know that man?" I asked quietly. Ryan shook his head. I didn't take my eyes off the guy. He was still standing there watching us. "Let's go," I muttered. We walked back to the car, my grip on Ryan's hand a little tighter than usual. I didn't look back. That whole night I felt on edge. My brain wouldn't let it go. The man's outstretched arms, the way he had called my son's name like he knew him. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came at bedtime. I was tucking Ryan in when he looked up at me and said, "Daddy, why didn't you let me go talk to my friend?" I froze. "Your friend?" I forced my voice to stay calm. "Yeah, the man from the park." My stomach dropped. "Ryan, you said you didn't know him." "I don't really," he admitted, "but we've been talking." A cold sweat prickled at my skin. "Talking?" Ryan nodded, like it was no big deal. "Yeah, the last few days when I play at recess, he stands by the fence and waves at me. Today he said we could play together at the park after school." My hands clenched the edge of his blanket. "Ryan," I said carefully, keeping my voice even, "what else has he said to you?" He frowned, thinking. "He asked what games I like. He told me I'm really cool. Oh, and he said he has a puppy at home, a really fluffy one." I felt lightheaded. Ryan must have seen my expression because his little face scrunched in concern. "Did I do something bad?" I forced a smile, brushing his hair back. "No, buddy, you didn't do anything wrong." But someone else had, and I was going to find out who. The next day I left work early. I wasn't about to let my son go to recess without me watching. I parked a block away from the school and walked over, blending in with the other parents picking up their kids. My heart pounded as I scanned the fence line. And then I saw him. Same hoodie, same too wide smile. He was leaning casually against the fence, watching the kids play like he had every right to be there. I gritted my teeth and started walking toward him. He noticed me when I was about 20 feet away. For a split second, his face changed. Then he straightened up and smirked like we were old friends. "Hey there," he said as I got closer. "Something wrong?" I stopped just short of him, my fists clenched. "Yeah," I said. "Why the hell are you talking to my son?" His smirk widened. "I just like kids." "Nothing wrong with that, is there?" I fought the urge to punch him. "You stay the hell away from him." He shrugged. "He's the one who talks to me." That set me off. I grabbed the front of his hoodie and slammed him against the fence. "Listen to me," I growled. "If I ever see you near my son again..." Pain flared across my ribs. I stumbled back, breath catching. He had a knife, a small one, but sharp enough that I could feel the burn where he nicked me. He held it low, close to his side, out of view from anyone else. "I'd be real careful," he said. My vision tunneled. Every instinct screamed at me to take him down, but I couldn't risk it. Not with kids nearby. I let go of his hoodie, breathing hard. His smirk was gone. He took a step back. "This is your only warning," he said. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing down the street like nothing had happened. I reported him, of course, filed a police report, told the school, did everything I could. But the man was gone. No one else had seen him. No cameras had caught him. The police said they'd keep an eye out, but without a name or a clear threat, there wasn't much they could do. Ryan still talks about him sometimes, like he was just another kid at the playground. I don't tell him the truth. That man had a plan, and I don't think it was the first time he tried it. I just thank God I was there to stop him, and I hope and pray that no other kid ever falls for his smile. In 2011, my girlfriend Lisa and I decided to go for a day hike in the remote valley of Hollow Creek, deep in the forests of Montana. It was a beautiful but isolated place, surrounded by mountains and thick woods that stretched for miles in every direction. Hardly anyone lived there, just a few scattered cabins and farms hidden deep in the trees. Most of the roads were unpaved dirt tracks that twisted through the wilderness, some leading nowhere at all. We had been looking for a new hiking trail, something peaceful and away from the crowds. Lisa found a loop trail online that went up into the hills and circled back into town. It seemed perfect. That morning, we packed some sandwiches, water, and a flashlight, just in case, and drove out to the trailhead. The day was perfect. The air was crisp and cool, filled with the scent of pine and damp earth. The only sounds were birds chirping and the occasional rustle of animals moving in the underbrush. It felt good to be out in nature, away from the noise of everyday life. Lisa and I talked as we walked, laughing about silly things, making plans for the future. Life had been busy lately, with work and responsibilities piling up, and this was the first time in months that we had spent a whole day together. We had been hiking for a couple of hours when we noticed a smaller trail branching off from the main path. It wasn't marked on the map, but curiosity got the best of us. We decided to explore it, figuring it would eventually lead back to the main trail. The deeper we went, the quieter the forest became. There was something different about this part of the woods. The trees stood closer together, casting long shadows even though the sun was still high. After about 15 minutes of walking, we saw something unexpected. A small log cabin nestled in a clearing. It looked old but well kept, with a wooden porch and a chimney that hadn't been used in a while. An old rusted truck sat in front, its driver's side door hanging open. The cabin's front door was also slightly ajar. Something about it didn't feel right. It wasn't just the way the truck was abandoned or the eerie stillness around it. It was the feeling in my gut, a quiet warning that told me we shouldn't be here. Lisa must have felt it too because she reached for my hand, squeezing it tightly. Just as we were about to turn around, a man stepped out of the cabin. He was in his late 30s, average build, wearing old jeans and a flannel shirt. His face was unshaven, his hair messy, like he hadn't slept in days. He smiled at us, raising a hand in greeting. "Well, well," he said. "Didn't expect to see anyone out here." His voice was friendly, but his eyes were sharp, watching us too closely. Something about him put me on edge, but I forced a smile. "Yeah, we were just hiking. Didn't mean to stumble onto your place." He nodded slowly, glancing around as if checking to see if we were alone. "Not many folks come this way," he said. "You too far from town?" "Not too far," I lied. "Just passing through." For a moment there was silence. Then he smiled again, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Why don't you come in for a cup of coffee?" Lisa and I both shook our heads. "No, thank you," she said quickly. "We should really be getting back." The man's smile faded just a little. "Come on now," he said, stepping off the porch. "It's no trouble at all. You've been hiking a while. You must be thirsty." I took a step back, putting myself slightly in front of Lisa. "We appreciate it, but we're on a tight schedule. Have to get back before dark." His expression changed. The friendliness disappeared, replaced by something colder. His eyes narrowed slightly and his posture stiffened. Then, without warning, he reached behind his back and pulled out a gun. "Get inside," he ordered, his voice sharp and final. Lisa let out a small gasp. I felt my whole body tense, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely think. We were frozen, unsure of what to do. "I said move," the man snapped, raising the gun. There was no choice. Hand in hand, we stepped toward the cabin. He motioned for us to go inside, keeping the gun trained on us the whole time. As soon as we crossed the threshold, he kicked the door shut and locked it. Lisa, her voice barely above a whisper, asked, "Who are you?" "What do you want?" The man ignored her. He pointed to a corner. "Sit down. Don't move." We did as he said, our backs pressed against the rough wooden wall. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what was happening. Was he planning to rob us? Or was this something much, much worse? Lisa tried again. "Please, just let us go. We won't tell anyone we were here." He turned and looked at her, then at me. "Ain't about that," he muttered. "They're coming, and when they do, you're gonna help me get out of this." I didn't know what he meant at first, but then, in the distance, I heard it, the faint sound of a helicopter. The man stiffened, his grip on the gun tightening. "They're here," he muttered. Minutes later, we heard the sound of vehicles approaching, tires crunching against gravel, doors slamming, then a voice over a loudspeaker. "This is the police. Come out with your hands up." The man ran to the window, dragging Lisa with him. He shoved the gun against her temple and shouted, "Back off or I'll shoot her." Lisa was sobbing, shaking in fear. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. "Let her go," I yelled. The police outside didn't respond right away. I could hear them talking, probably trying to figure out a plan. The man laughed. "That's right," he said. "You back off." But then something outside changed. We heard movement, a shuffle of boots. The man turned toward the window, trying to see what was happening. Then he raised his gun and fired. Glass shattered. Gunfire erupted from outside. The man stumbled back, then spun toward me, his face red with fury. "Kneel," he ordered. "Hands behind your head." I didn't want to obey, but I knew if I refused, he'd shoot me anyway. Slowly, I moved to the center of the room, sinking to my knees. He pressed the gun against the back of my head. I closed my eyes. Then, bang! The gunshot rang out, but I was still alive. I opened my eyes just in time to see the man collapse to the floor. Blood pooled beneath him, his chest rising and falling in ragged, uneven breaths. The SWAT team had burst in, taking him down. A police officer grabbed my shoulder. "Are you hurt?" I could barely answer. My whole body was shaking, but somehow we were alive. The police cleared the cabin, then took our statements. Hours later, they let us go. Lisa and I drove back in silence, too shocked to speak. That night, we curled up under blankets, still feeling the weight of what had happened. We had survived, but the fear, the memory of that gun against my head, would never truly leave us. Lisa and I stayed together for a few years after that, but eventually life took us in different directions. We broke up in 2014, but we still kept in touch. And every time we talked, no matter what, we always found ourselves remembering that day. Some things, no matter how much time passes, stay with you forever. I never should have taken that road. But when you've been driving for hours, lost, tired, and hungry, the idea of a shortcut feels like a blessing. I had been traveling alone through the outskirts of Wyoming, trying to make it to my cousin's ranch before dark. My phone had lost signal miles ago. The GPS had stopped updating, and the only guidance I had was an old paper map that barely made sense. When I saw a faded wooden sign pointing towards Swift Creek, I figured it would connect back to the highway eventually. The road started fine, just a quiet, lonely dirt path stretching through tall pines. The deeper I drove, though, the rougher it became. The trees closed in, swallowing the last bits of daylight. My tires crunched over gravel and fallen leaves, and with every turn, the road got narrower, as if the forest itself was closing in around me. Then I saw it, a single light in the distance, glowing faintly between the trees, a cabin. I had already been on edge, but something about the place made my stomach tighten. It looked off. Not abandoned, but not quite lived in either. The wood was aged and dark, the roof sagged slightly, and an old pickup truck sat outside, half covered in dirt. The driver's side door was hanging open. I slowed down, my fingers tightening on the wheel. Maybe someone lived here, someone who could give me directions. Or maybe I should just keep driving. Before I could decide, a man stepped out onto the porch. He looked to be in his 40s with a rough, unshaven face and a body that looked strong but slightly worn. His clothes were simple, jeans and a jacket that had seen better days. When he spotted me, his expression changed in a way I couldn't quite place, like he hadn't expected anyone to find him out here. I didn't want to stop. Everything in me told me to just keep going, but he raised a hand and waved. Not in a frantic way, not like he was in trouble, just a slow, casual wave. I rolled down my window a few inches. "Evening," I called out, keeping my voice steady. "I think I took a wrong turn. Does this road lead back to the highway?" The man smiled, but his eyes flicked toward my car, scanning it. "Sure does," he said. "Couple more miles up. But it's rough going. Might be best to rest a bit before driving it in the dark." I hesitated. "I don't have far to go." Still, he said, stepping down off the porch. Wouldn't hurt to stretch your legs. Maybe have a cup of coffee. It's no trouble. Something about the way he said it made my skin prickle. He was friendly, but insistent. Too insistent. Appreciate it, I said, forcing a smile. But I should really keep moving. I shifted the car into drive. But before I could press the gas, he moved closer. Too close. His hand landed on the side mirror, fingers curling around the edge. You sure? He asked, his voice just a little too calm. It gets real dark out here. A lot of folks get lost. My pulse pounded in my ears. I gave him another quick nod, forced my foot onto the pedal, and started moving. His hand slipped off the mirror, but he didn't move back. He just stood there, watching as I drove past. I exhaled sharply, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. That was close. Too close. But just as I started feeling relieved, something in my rearview mirror made my stomach drop. The man was no longer standing by the cabin. He was walking toward his truck, and a second later, the truck's headlights flicked on. Panic surged through me. I pressed harder on the gas, my tires skidding slightly on the uneven road. The trees blurred past as I sped up, the darkness swallowing everything except for my own headlights. Then, in the distance, I saw it, the road splitting. One side led further into the woods. The other, I hoped, would take me back to the main road. But before I could reach it, the roar of an engine filled the air. The truck behind me was speeding up, fast. I gritted my teeth, my heart hammering against my ribs. He was catching up. I floored the gas, my car bouncing wildly over the uneven dirt road. The tires struggled for grip, kicking up dust and gravel. The truck behind me did the same, its headlights glaring in my mirrors, growing larger, closer. Then, crack, a gunshot. Something sharp hit my rear windshield, spiderwebbing the glass. I gasped, my whole body jolting with fear. He was shooting at me. I swerved, barely keeping control. The split in the road was right ahead. I had to choose, and I had to choose now. Right. I yanked the wheel and veered onto the new path. My tires skidded, my car fishtailing wildly before gripping the dirt again. For a second, I thought I had lost him. The trees thickened, the road sloped downward. If I could just keep going. Then in the mirror, I saw his truck take the same turn. He wasn't giving up. The road twisted sharply, forcing me to slow down. My hands were slick with sweat, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. I had to think. I couldn't outrun him forever. Then just ahead, I spotted it, a narrow opening in the trees, barely wide enough for my car. It was risky, but I had no choice. I yanked the wheel hard to the left and shot through the gap. Branches scraped against the sides of my car, snapping loudly as I crashed through. My heart pounded. If I got stuck, if I hit something. But then suddenly the road appeared again, paved, smooth, real. The highway. I burst onto the asphalt, my tires screeching as I turned sharply. My headlights lit up a green road sign ahead, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw real proof that I wasn't lost. Then I glanced in the mirror. The truck was gone. I didn't slow down, not for another 10 miles. When I finally reached the next town, I pulled into a gas station, parked under the bright lights and sat there, my hands shaking. My rear windshield was cracked, my car scratched up, but I was alive. I never told anyone the full story. What could I say? That I took a wrong turn and ended up running for my life? That some stranger in the woods decided I was his next target? All I know is this: whenever I drive through the countryside now, and I see a small, lonely cabin hidden between the trees, I don't stop. I don't even slow down.